Hey, it's American Bandstand.
Hey, Case, you know what those tunes mean?
Hey, that means we're on the air. Hopefully people are listening to us. Welcome everybody to Studio C, KYOS AM 1480. It's the Thursday night show, January 30th of Citizen Watch. In studio, we have Robert, the Velvet Sledgehammer Tomasetti. We have Steve Colvard, the best engineer in all of California in AM radio. And I'm Casey Steed from our remote satellite location out here overlooking beautiful Lake El Reno in Oklahoma. And I want to
probably a swamp hole.
That we have in studio with us there a very special guest who's not afraid of Citizen Watch, our own Merced County District Attorney, Larry Morse. Larry, thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Congratulations on the success of your show, gentlemen.
1963 graduate of University of Arkansas.
People know a little bit about Larry. He's the fourth of 6 children, a University of Arkansas graduate, a Razorback, and comes from a long line of litigators, even though they may not claim him. But he's a former reporter for the Arkansas Democrat, so he can appreciate the power of the press. And I just, again, want to welcome you in studio, Larry. We've often talked about the crime problem in Merced. We call the Easter Massacre in Winton. We have the killing fields out in Planada. And I just want to read a couple of excerpts, couple of words from an article that appeared in the Sun Star on Monday, or Tuesday. No, it was Wednesday, actually, I believe. It came after the board meeting this week. It said the County Board of Supervisors got an earful Tuesday from the district attorney, who urged the supervisors to devote more resources to fighting gang violence. Each year I have spoken with members of this board and told them that the amount of money and the resources we are devoting to the gang problem is not enough. And each year, nothing has changed. The result, as we have just seen, is a year in which 19 people were murdered in the unincorporated areas of our county, the majority of them gang-related. That tells us that we had a significantly higher per capita murder rate than either Fresno or Stanislaus County. A particular concern to this board should be the 19 homicides in the unincorporated area, far and away the most ever. The primary responsibility of the district attorney is to prosecute crimes, not solve or prevent them. Has the DA's office not devoted scarce resources to this undertaking, Merced County would have had no organized gang strategy or response to gang violence, despite the presence of more than 5,000 validated gang members in this county. The DA's office charged 15 gang-related homicides in the last 3 years, but only one of those cases came from the Sheriff's Department. The Merced Police Department Gang Suppression Unit has 5 officers and 1 sergeant assigned to gang suppression, compared to the Sheriff's Department having just 1 officer. And then Larry goes on to say, I've never seen Supervisor take one constructive leadership step in getting funding to fight gang violence when his district has some of the most violent gang activity in Merced County. Any resident of District 1 who wants to know what the DA's office is doing in response to the terrible gang problems in their communities should not hesitate to call this office directly. And I'm sure that applies to the other districts. Larry would be happy to tell people what's happening in their district. But Larry, those were some powerful statements. We've been talking about this on Citizen Watch for over a year. And I just wanted to ask you, who do you serve at the pleasure of, the Board of Supervisors or the voters of Merced County?
Well, I'm a constitutional officer. I serve at the pleasure of the voters of Merced County. The Board of Supervisors controls my budget, but not what we do with the revenue that we have to operate with. And you can imagine I'm making friends and influencing people in on the 3rd floor over there. But and I have regard for the members of the Board of Supervisors. But this was a long time in coming, and it's more than just a public safety issue. And this is the point I really wanted to stress, is that this is an economic development issue in this county, and the business community and the people who care about the future of Merced. UC Merced for example, should be very concerned about this trend. We are trending in the wrong direction with violent crime and gangs. Let's just imagine that you're a parent and you have your 18-year-old daughter who's an outstanding student and looking to go to a college, and UC Merced is one of the colleges that she wants to consider. Parents are always going to be concerned about the safety of a community in which they're going to send their child, and they find out that this community has been judged the 88th most dangerous place in the United States, and that there were 29 homicides in the last year. That is going to have an impact on a decision as to whether to attend UC Merced. It's going to make it more difficult for us to attract businesses, to engage in significant economic development, and to keep the people that form a large portion of our tax base here in this community, instead of looking for other communities that have perhaps a more synchronized strategy with respect to public safety. So it's an issue that should be of concern to a great many people outside the law enforcement community.
Well, I agree, and I think economic development, we've heard that over and over again. If we're going to get out of the fiscal and financial morass that we're in, we need more industry. We need more development. We have the 10th University of California, a true jewel in the system, and yet, as you say, we're in the top 100 most dangerous places to live. I wouldn't send my kid there.
Well, that is a tragedy as well, because I don't think any of us, certainly none of us who are on the radio today, feel like Merced is the 88th most dangerous place in the country. I certainly don't, and Mr. Tomasetti and I are neighbors in the downtown area of Merced. I
don't know you.
Going to deny me thrice here. So,
hey, I got a lot of kudos for Larry, man. I see a lot of stuff. Larry stops at my stop sign religiously.
Yes, I do stop all four wheels, and but we. This was a part of a frustration that I've had, because the most significant statistic is that the Merced Police Department has had a gang task force, a gang violence suppression unit, for almost 20 years. In fact, my chief investigator, Pat Lunny, created it when he was still the police chief. So that was almost 20 years ago. He put this unit together. Currently, Chief Norm Andrade, has 5 officers and a sergeant assigned to the gang violence suppression unit. More than that, and this is the number that's really difficult to reconcile, which has aggravated me, is that the Merced Police Department has 2 people assigned to the county gang task force, one more than the Sheriff's Department has had. So, including a sergeant. And a sergeant from MPD is running the Merced County Gang Task Force. So MPD has 8 people assigned to gang suppression in the county versus 1. Now, I must hasten to add that the new sheriff, Tom Cavallero, who I think the world of, is first thing that he did upon becoming sheriff in the first couple of days was to redirect what was known as the STAR team, disband that, and redirect those resources to the task forces, the narcotics task force and the gang task force. But much of this is a directive that has to come in part from the Board of Supervisors. They have the bully pulpit. While they can't control either my funding or what I do with my funding or the sheriff's, they can certainly say what our priorities are. These are our priorities. And this happened a few years ago when the farmers were complaining about the rampant theft of metals from their farms. They raised holy hell with the Board of Supervisors, and an ag task force in the Sheriff's Department was created. The gang problem is the single biggest public safety issue in this county, and it needs the kind of priority that it deserves.
I have a question.
Well, I agree. Go ahead, Robert.
My question is okay, how come I can't hear me?
You might have to turn your headphones up a little bit.
No, my headphones are up.
I don't know.
Do the switch. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I can't hear myself.
I can hear you.
Okay, anyways, my question, Larry, is okay, this priority, does that come from the sheriff, or does that, in other words, when you go with your budget and you go to the Board of Supervisors, you say, look, these are my priorities at the district attorney's office, and this is what I need help with. I need help with this, this, and this. Wasn't that Mark's job to go to the Board of Supervisors?
Yeah, then it brings up another interesting question, too, because, the Sheriff's Department is on here on a regular rotation. And one of the things that they consistently warned myself against is not to lump everything into gang violence, that the issues that we deal with on a criminal basis is easy to dismiss as gang violence, but they brought up things like substance abuse and homelessness and things like that. It didn't seem to be a big of a pressing issue to them, and I think it's reflective in the resources that they dedicated to that.
Well, that's what I'm asking.
Where was the disconnect there?
Well, Mark and I had I think a disagreement to some degree about what the root causes of the gang problem were. Mark, and I don't want to speak for him, but I think his belief was that it was tied more to transnational drug cartels, and that they were behind some of the violence that manifests itself on our streets and in gang shooting stuff. And I would never say that there's not some element of that, but much of what we're having in Planada or Winton or Delhi or the other unincorporated areas, 19 homicides, most of those are gang related. These kids are not 15, 16, 17, 18-year-olds. They're not some cog in a vast transnational drug operation. They're Sereno, Norteño, blue, red, you disrespected me, you're in my neighborhood. It's not more complicated than that in many instances. Sure, there's money. There's huge drug money that permeates all aspects of crime. But we don't believe, and I don't think most of the people who are in charge of gang, suppression in this county or throughout the state would say that it is primarily tied to narcotics trafficking. That has not been our experience. We've prosecuted, dozens of gang cases over the last, several years, and we're not seeing that they are some, part of a vast drug network. We're seeing that this was, a blue and a red, and you're in my territory and you're in my neighborhood, and I've got a semi-automatic weapon, and I'm opening fire.
Right. We had an issue with that on New Year's Eve. We had a gentleman that went to the wrong party. He was either a red or a blue, I'm not sure, but walked into a New Year's Eve party of the opposing gang and literally had to take off running down the street because he was getting shots fired at him, got hit, crawled into the backyard of somebody in the neighborhood and died.
Right. No, I'm very familiar with that case, and that's not drug cartel.
Right.
And even if you accept the premise that it's tied in some way to narcotics trafficking, it's not an either or proposition. You can do both. You can devote resources, which we do, to narcotics trafficking, and that, but you can also have a robust gang suppression strategy. To have had one person assigned to gangs for the entire county of Merced just did not make sense to me, and I expressed that many times to Mark, and we debated and argued about this. But what aggravated me especially was that I was spending double the money that the sheriff's department was on gang suppression when that isn't my primary function. So I would have to make cuts in my budget. I've been trying to keep my employees because we've all been hit really hard. And I'm like, this is just an inequity that I am having to subsidize the gang suppression strategy in this county. That's not what I should be doing. But if we didn't do it, if there wasn't a countywide gang task force, which I helped create, then we weren't going to have anything.
We wouldn't have any crime solved.
Well,
we have these nutnicks that are fighting over points on a compass, colors on a color wheel.
No, but Garrett,
and what Larry's talking about is we need to have resources dedicated, like we dedicated to the copper thefts, so that we have some boots on the ground and, more pointedly, some intelligence.
Yeah, but
because as Larry can tell you, you need to have some intel. People need to start talking, somebody they can talk to, a gang detective, an investigator. And if we only have one person for a county of 500,000 people, that's not going to cut it.
Right. And that brings up another interesting point, Case. It's kind of time for us to take our first break. But I'd like to get your opinion, Mr. Morris, on the lack of cooperation that we seem to get from our citizens when it comes to these gang-type things. And I'd like to get your opinion on the way out. And I'd also like to get your opinion before I let you go on how we fight this. I mean, do you meet force with force? Is it just just is it a matter of of strength?
Real quick, that doesn't make sense to me. It's like Larry said. The sheriff said, "Okay, this is this multi-international drug ring," but how do the drugs get to the street? You got to go through the gangs. So
yeah, but you're not really finding that, are you? I mean, you're not.
Not so much. I mean, there's drug trafficking that goes on. There's obviously commerce to buy guns, to do some of that stuff. You got to have money. Some of it is through auto theft. Some of it is through narcotics trafficking. Some of it's organized. Some of it's not that organized, not part of a transnational cartel. But to the question of local involvement, let's use Planada as an example. If you do not have a task force, if you do not have people that are working an area on a regular basis, and there's a shooting out there, the residents are going to be very leery of cooperating with law enforcement, because after they come and cleared the crime scene, they're going to leave, and these people have to stay in those communities. And they're way more afraid of the repercussions of being seen to cooperate than they are of the police. So what a task force does, what GVSU has done, and it should be noted, City of Merced, same size roughly as the county in terms of population, had 5 homicides last year, and I can't say how many of those were gang related, but contrast that 5 with 19, and you have to put your resources where your problems are, priority-wise. What a task force does, GVSU, they have sources, snitches, contacts, people to go to, which does 2 things. One, when there is a crime, let's say there's a shooting over in Loughborough or whatever, they have people to talk to, relationships they've developed, networks of folks that they can tap into. Trust has been established. And then that gives them a leg up in solving a case, but they might hear, there's going to be a retaliation, there's going to be something go down this weekend over in another neighborhood or whatever. So they get intel that helps them prevent future crimes, not unlike Homeland Security. None of us probably have any idea of how many, incidents have been prevented in this country because of the intel that was accumulated by Homeland Security. It is the same thing with the task force. We need to have people in these communities on a regular basis that are establishing relationships, developing trust, and being looked at as a source of strength and security, and a way to make their community safer.
Well said. It's time to take our first break. You're listening to Citizen Watch here on this beautiful Tuesday evening, and I say beautiful because it rained, which is something we all need.
Thursday evening.
What'd I say?
What?
Tuesday.
See,
there you go, Case. I love you, buddy.
It's Thursday evening here in Merced. Listen to Citizen Watch, Casey Steed, Robert Tomasetti, in-studio guest, Merced County District Attorney. What's your name again?
Larry Morse.
Larry Morse.
We'll be right back. Go.
Welcome back, folks. Hope you stayed with us through that commercial break. We're here on Citizen Watch, AM 1480, KYOS, the power of local radio, the big voice on the AM dial. We appreciate you listening to us on this hopefully very rainy Thursday night. We have in studio, of course, Rob, the Velvet Sledgehammer Tomasetti. Big shout out to Robert's dad. We appreciate you listening all the way back there in Las Vegas or Chicago, wherever you happen to be at.
He's in Las Vegas.
Myself, Casey Steed, Steve Colvard, and of course this very special guest, Merced District Attorney Larry Morse, one of the founding members of the Boys and Girls Club, elected in 2006 and still proudly serving. I believe he's up for re-election this year.
I am.
And that's a good thing. One of the things in the article that was printed Tuesday, it said, the county supervisors had few comments Tuesday regarding Morris's remark about devoting resources for fighting gang violence. Supervisor 4 Deidre Kelsey says, yes, we've been aware of it for a long time, but we didn't have the opportunity to make changes to how that was handled. We've had that opportunity now. We need to do something. District 1 Supervisor John Pedroso swung the criticism back at Morse, saying the district attorney's office does not send representatives to Pedroso's town hall meetings to answer the public questions. I don't know if handing out coloring books and ping pong balls at town hall meetings is really the answer, Larry, but what do you think we should be doing?
Well, you have to make it the priority. You have to have a consensus among the stakeholders involved in this, and that's obviously the board members and the law enforcement community, that this is in fact our number one priority, and that we are going to direct resources to bringing down the gang violence in this county. I mean,
and resources is money, right, Larry?
Resources is money, or redirection of existing resources. We're all tight. Believe me, I am acutely aware of the financial straits of this county. I have had a declining budget and been faced with cutting my budget every single year since I became elected. I have not had a surplus budget, I don't think, since I became elected. And sometimes it's been devastating in many respects, and sometimes it makes you more creative and more efficient in making your money go further. And we have to be mindful of the fact that it's taxpayer money that we're spending, and we got to make sure that we're getting the very most out of the money that we do have. But it's a prioritization process, and you have to look at what's going on in your community and say, what is the number one law enforcement issue that we're facing? And in my view, that's the gang problem. Narcotics are awful. I understand that. But a person with a terrible drug habit, aside from maybe destroying, the fabric of his own home, or God forbid if he's driving or doing something like that, is mostly damaging himself. People who are driving around, engaging in shootouts are imperiling the people in those communities, and they're stealing the soul of those neighborhoods as well, because when you take the comfort level that somebody has in their own neighborhood, and you make people fearful to walk down the street, walk their dogs, send their kids to the park, you've done a heck of a lot more to the overall sense of community than just commit a crime. And that's what I can't stand.
What's happened to your own neighborhood, Larry, where you live?
We're fine.
We're good. We're good.
We're good in the hood.
They got Tomasetti in the hood.
Good in the hood.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to be
Roach.
Hey, I'm going to be funny. No, he's moved. He used to live across the street from Larry. What happened was I don't know about down where Larry's at, but where I'm at, people walk past and there's never a problem.
I've lived at downtown over on 23rd and Martin Luther King for 20 years, and I have never had a problem. I know people, think, oh, downtown, and
I never have either.
I've not had a problem, and I walk. I'm careful. I don't, walk around 3 in the morning or whatever. But I walk in the evenings. I'm around downtown, and I'm comfortable there. And that's another thing that has always, been a concern to me, is that you will never be able to fully develop the downtown business district if you do not spend time making the downtown residential district an area that people perceive to be safe. In many communities, the downtown residential areas are the most desirable places to live. And you have these beautiful old Victorian homes and craftsman home and Berkeley bungalows. Robert's Place is gorgeous. Mine was built in the late 30s.
You had a new pool put in.
Yeah, it's a beautiful neighborhood. But the perception that many people have that it's dangerous down there becomes self-perpetuating, and it's contrary to our interest in developing a vibrant downtown business district.
Well, you know what bugged me is I was reading, Casey, I was reading the article, and the lady whose daughter, who was 16 years old in Atwater, that I guess showed up with a pitcher and got all upset, and she said,
well, she was a mother of the Atwater massacre.
I understand that, but you have the article there. She says something like, our kids are killing each other, and what is law enforcement? What is the government doing? And I'm like, why is your 16-year-old daughter at a gang party?
Well, I have a response to that. A lot of these kids, we tend to lump all of them in as gang members, right? And that was not strictly a gang party. A lot of these kids, I have 3 sons, they've all grown up in this community. They have friends that they played football, basketball, baseball, whatever with when they were 8, 9, 10, from all parts of the city, from tougher neighborhoods, from everything else. Some of those kids get off the track, get into gang life, but they see them in school and high school, and they're still friendly. Doesn't mean that they're gang members. They may go to a party where there are some gang elements there, but it's not just strictly an all, blue, all red sort of a...
Well, I didn't mean that, Larry. What I mean is if I'm a good parent, my mother used to say, where are you going? So I'm going to Steve Colvard's house. Good. Have Mrs. Colvard call me when you get there. Okay, we have kids that are
Those
going.
days are gone.
Those days are gone. We got kids who are going to places that they shouldn't be. Or, I mean, I would be suspect. I know.
I'm not sure those days were ever here. Yes, our parents asked us that, but yeah,
Ours did. Are you kidding? My mom would kill us.
My parents did ask us that, and we would occasionally take a dodge and end up somewhere where we weren't supposed to be. And that's not new to this generation.
That's a good point.
No, but what I'm saying is that you have a 16-year-old daughter who's at a party. Are you aware of what the party's about? Who's there? Yes, it might be a friend, but you know what? My dad would do that. My dad would say, "Hey, you know this guy over here? That's trouble. You know, you hang with trouble, you're gonna, they're gonna lump you in there. You don't want to be identified with that."
But
and you kind of stayed away from it.
We do our best as parents, and there's some luck involved. You can do everything you know as parents.
Dad, you were lucky.
Your dad was lucky. I mean, and you do the right things, and you improve the chances of being lucky. And I had the best parents anyone could possibly have, and I still got in all kinds of trouble. Every time you send your kids out, there's a little bit of a hope and a prayer that nothing bad is going to happen to them, that they're going to make good decisions, that they're not going to find themselves in a place where they shouldn't be.
No, and I understand that, Larry, but I think it's very wrong for a parent to use a pulpit like that and then criticize the government or the DA's office or the police department. It starts at home. The parenting starts at home.
It does, but we don't know anything about her. I mean, you don't think in a community like this that even if my daughter ends up going to a party that I wasn't necessarily aware that she's going to, that she's going to be shot dead.
Right.
She may have holy hell to deal with me when she gets home, but I don't expect her to be shot dead along with two other people.
And one place where we've kind of devolved, if I may, is back in the day when we had disagreements, we settled it with our fists.
Absolutely.
It was a fist fight.
Absolutely.
Now they pull out a gun.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's no do-overs.
I was in more than my fair share of fist fights, and you worried about a chipped tooth or a broken nose or your pride mostly. And the disagreements have always been over the same thing. You looked at somebody's girl, somebody disrespected you in some way or another, told you were a punk or whatever, and it was on. But now these people are pulling out semi-automatic handguns, and 18-year-olds just don't have any real conception of the damage that a .40 caliber bullet does when it hits a body. And it's the most compelling thing that has changed, because the disagreements, the fights, the disputes are time immemorial. They've always been about the same thing.
Absolutely.
It's the weaponry that's brought into it. I mean,
the savagery.
Yeah, if we knew somebody that had a switchblade, it was woo.
I
got one. I got one question to Larry. Why now? Now, I'm going to be very honest with you. You and I have talked at the Idolo Lodge many times in difference, and this has always been a theme with you. Why now? Why bring it up, and why put the supervisors on the spot now? Why not a year ago, 2 years ago, last week?
Believe me, I thought this through for a while. A couple of things. I had gone through back channels with the supervisors individually, and I have good relationships with many of them, and talked to them ad nauseum that you have to deal with this through back channels. You've got to deal with this. You have got to put resources in it. You have got to lean on the sheriff's department to come up with a gang strategy. You can imagine when they're telling me I have to cut my budget in some way that I have squealed. Why am I having to cut my budget when I am spending $600,000-$700,000 supporting the county gang task force more than the sheriff's department is? Why am I having to cut my budget? So I had all those conversations. Sometimes you just have to go big or go home, and my job is to be the top law enforcement person in this county and to speak the truth. And
aren't you frustrated, Larry? Aren't you getting a lot of heat when you go out in public saying, "Hey, what are you doing about it?"
Oh, but I was at Los Banos earlier this month at Sportsman's, and I had several people confront me about the statistics that just come out about Merced and the homicides and the 88th most dangerous, and I'm trying to explain to people that, hey, we've been doing this, and this. Well, one of my favorite political expressions is when you're explaining, you're losing. And I was, these guys were just looking at me, and they're lumping us all together, the DA, the sheriff, the police chiefs, and you're the DA. We've got 29 homicides in this county.
Do something.
Ergo, this is your responsibility. So they don't care that I have created the gang task force, and I have been pleading and beseeching, the board or whatever in back channels because I don't like the confrontation way of doing business. And I hadn't gotten the results that I wanted.
Well, I'm leading, and the reason I asked you the question is because I'm leading to two things.
Sure.
Okay, first of all, Deidre Kelsey's response, we've known about it for a while, but haven't done crap about it, which is Deidre Kelsey's answer because she's living in her little gold mine over there in Snelling. I think she's just out of touch. And, if I could find a mobile home to move to Snelling and live there for a while so I can run against her,
I'm hearing somebody in our community might actually challenge her this go
Good.
Yeah.
And the other thing, and I'm going to be very honest with you, Larry, I love you. You know that. But people have said Larry's doing this because Pat's running for sheriff. And Pat's one of Larry's guys. And this might paint. And people have asked me this. I mean, I didn't come up with this. And they said, is Larry doing this because, he's going to support Pat because Pat's his guy?
I don't think so.
No, that's a very fair question. I don't have a problem with that. I am supporting Pat, but the 29 homicides speaks for itself. It didn't have anything to do with Pat's candidacy. Here's, I am not against any of the other people that are running for sheriff. I know them. I know the three who work in the sheriff's department, and I think the world of all of them. They are all good, solid men, good, solid law enforcement guys. I have the highest regard for all three of them. But in my view, I've known Pat for 20-some years. It's like having Babe Ruth in your community. There is literally no more qualified person to be sheriff than Pat Lunny in this entire county. I mean, the guy supervised a department of 1,400 people when he was the director of the Division of Law Enforcement and managed a budget of $140 million. I don't want to have on-the-job training for somebody to take over the sheriff's department. I know Pat. He is widely respected, not just in Merced, the endorsement of every police chief in Merced, former sheriffs. He's not old. He's 10 years younger than the governor. He's 10 years younger than Close. Well,
here's what
if Pat Lunny is old, we should all be as fortunate because he's in better shape than anybody in this room.
Well, everybody in this room is over 40, I think is fair to say.
Not me.
And we still think we have quite a bit of fire in the furnace left. But
what I'm saying is people have just asked me that, and I have Larry here.
I get it.
Larry's awesome about just asking him questions, and so is Pat.
Yeah.
People are saying, hey, look, Larry and Mark didn't get along there towards the end, and maybe this is Larry's.
I've had the honor and the privilege to talk to both of you and Mark.
They're awesome.
It just what I'm getting out of this conversation is
different priorities.
Exactly. The severity of the gang issue here is much higher on your ladder than it is on his. He seemed to almost minimize it. That we were making a big deal out of nothing, and that there's a lot of other contributing factors. I mean, if I'm paraphrasing that correctly.
God knows Mark can speak for himself, and he and I have a very interesting, almost fraternal relationship. We have screamed and yelled at each other, and hugged. And I love Mark, and he's like family to me in a lot of ways. But you want to see battles? Come sit at the Morse dinner table sometime with
you and Neil,
5 attorneys in the family. I mean, I can disagree with Mark and still have great admiration and respect for him, and I do. But you can't deny the numbers. 19 homicides in the county. It has just gone exponentially more violent. And we know where the pockets of gang activity are happening. It's not an either-or proposition where, we're either going to throw our resources into narcotics or gangs. They're the two,
that's what I was saying, isn't it?
Flip sides of a coin.
Yeah.
Yep. Let's put some resources into the gang problem.
Absolutely.
You can't ignore the fact that you have 29 homicides in the county of Merced, the most ever. It speaks for itself. We have, when around the state, violent crime is going down. Fresno had 53. There are 900,000 people. That would, if you did the exponential on that, the population to the rate of homicides, we'd have been over 100.
And the common denominator in your view is gangs.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm a knucklehead, and I knew that.
It's time to take our commercial break here. You're listening to Citizen Watch here on this Thursday evening with Robert Tomasetti, Casey Steed, myself, and Merced County District Attorney Larry Morse. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Citizen Watch, folks. Our final segment here on this beautiful, rainy Thursday
Are they
evening
firing
on
us?
KYOS, AM 1480. We draw out words that breathe and thoughts that burn.
Oh, my gosh.
Citizen Watch, the voice of the valley, the power of local radio. I don't know the key to success, but I know the key to failure is trying to please everybody.
True.
And Larry Morris is our guest in studio, and he's not one to try to please everybody, but he's trying to take care of the constituents that he serves under. We've been talking about the gang problem here in Merced, and I just want to take a minute to send out condolences to former DA Pat Halford's family. He passed away yesterday at 94. He served as our district attorney from 1962 to 1986. He was credited, one of the things in the paper I thought was interesting, he was credited with keeping adult bookstores and strip clubs out of Merced. I know Larry has continued in that vein, as we don't have any in town. He also prosecuted Kenneth Parnell, the child molester who kidnapped Stephen Stainer. And I'd like to give kudos to Larry for prosecuting Al Rivera, the cop killer that killed Stephen Gray, and that was a big feather in your cap.
Stefan.
Yeah.
Okay, what I wanted to say when we were brought back, thank you, Casey, is we were talking about Pat. And like Larry had said that, you know what, I have a difference of opinion with Mark. I love him. And that's what we try to do here at Citizen Watch, because we respect people. But if we don't agree with you philosophically, like Larry said, it's not personal. You know, no, and that's what I liked. And that's one thing about Larry that I really appreciate is he could disagree with you, but you know what? You shake hands and tomorrow you're still friends. And a lot of the people that we criticize can't do that, and that's sad.
Well, Larry can stand the heat of Citizen Watch, and he's been a great guest before. And
that's because I don't give him any heat.
Maybe we should talk about what we need to do. You know, we've had Sam Wrangle on with his mojo, taking these kids out. You know, Robert mentioned that a lot of this starts at home. We know that a lot of these homes are irrevocably broken. We've heard Sam talk about taking kids back to their home after doing odd jobs, and their dad that they haven't seen in 10 years lives 2 blocks away. You know, some of these things we just can't legislate. We can't throw money at and have them solved. They do start at home. But what can we do more, Larry? I know you have your Project 10%. You may want to talk about that. Feel free.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Casey. Well, it's an integrated process, obviously, if we're going to have any success in making our communities safer. It can't be all stick, and I have never, ever advocated that. You can't arrest or prosecute your way out of gang problems or law enforcement problems in general. You can't incarcerate your way out of law enforcement problems. What you need to do is give kids meaningful alternatives to being dragged into a gang lifestyle. One of the things I did several years ago, which was not popular in some quarters, was getting the junior high, middle school day extended. They were being released at 2 o'clock in the afternoon every day. We worked with educators in the community and got that extended till after 3 o'clock. So you reduce the window of opportunities for 4,000 middle school kids to either make bad decisions or be susceptible to, you know, the lure of the streets or gangs or whatever. So just little incremental things that can make a difference. Obviously, I'm very much engaged in the Project 10%. The idea, again, being having UC students go into our middle schools and explain to them how important it is to graduate from high school, and challenging them with their own stories, the UC students' own stories, that they too can graduate from high school and go on to college or a UC. The single biggest determiner of whether or not a person is going to be in the criminal justice system, and I cannot emphasize this enough, is high school graduation. If a person drops out of high school, they are 7 times more likely to end up in prison. I mean, those are staggering statistics. So anything that we can do to keep our kids in school through high school at a minimum is an investment in our future. Boys and Girls Club, all these.
You brought up at the start of the show that a lot of this has to do with economic development. Getting these kids graduated, they have better earning potential. They're less likely to be leeches on the system. They're going to be productive members of society. And isn't that what we need?
That's exactly what we need and we want. I mean, these are issues that at first blush may appear to be only public safety, law enforcement issues, but they are really core issues with long-term economic vitality of this area for sure. And we have one of the great economic engines that any community could ever hope for with UC Merced. And in order for us to maximize what it offers, we have to make sure that we are creating a workforce that is going to take full advantage of the opportunities that are generated by having a UC campus here. So go ahead, Rob.
No, to make Larry's point, I was reading a book by Bernard Goldberg called Biased, and he talks about the L word in the... Anyways, his book is about how the news considers liberal being normal and conservative being different. They will say nothing about a liberal being on TV, but if Larry comes on, they'll say our conservative Republican Larry Morse, the district attorney from Merced. And they always use the C word, but never the L word. But in his book, he talks about a silent growing problem in the world, especially America, is latchkey children. You've got parents who feel that they have to encumber themselves economically, and mothers aren't doing their job, which is mothering. They'd rather go to work, drop the kid off, and like Larry says, the kid's home at 2 o'clock, he's got nothing to do. If they extend that school day, guess what? You lose that window. You're moving that window of opportunity. And Bernard Goldberg had said that exactly, that these latchkey kids are the problems, because what you've got is idleness and let's call my friends and mischief and things like that.
Well, except I think most of the mothers who are working are doing so out of necessity. In Merced County, with our unemployment problem, with economic challenges that we've had over the last several years, most of the women that I know who are working are doing so because they absolutely have to make ends meet. And that's even, sadder in many respects. A lot of these mothers would like nothing better, or fathers, to be able to stay home, to be there at 3:30 or whatever when their child comes home. But finances just dictate that that's not possible. So we do ask our schools to do more, and maybe that's not what they were necessarily created to do. We ask them to provide a daycare or an after-school care component, but we have to work more closely with each other. One of the things that I've really learned, I've worked in the United States Congress, I worked in the state Senate for 6 or 7 years, and I've worked in county government for a lot of years, is there is a real disconnect oftentimes between government agencies. We're doing one thing over in the law enforcement community, and educators may be doing something that is counter to the direction that we're trying to go. And just as an example, we're doing all these gang intervention programs and we're throwing our resources into the gang problem on the one hand, and then on the other, this was several years ago, we had the schools releasing 4,000 12, 13, and 14-year-olds every day at 2 o'clock onto the streets. I'm like, well, this is just counterproductive here. You're putting more kids on the street every day and increasing the likelihood that they're going to start doing stupid things like, they don't start off at 12, 13, and 14 shooting people. It's petty thefts, it's burglaries, it's drug use, it's, purse snatches, it's all that. And they get more and more inculcated in gang life, and then they start inculcated. Is that right? Yeah, inculcated.
I like that one.
Yeah, thank you. That was my thesaurus for the day. That's my Payson word.
It's my Payson word. I knew he was going there.
Mark would be proud of me. Anyway, and so I've really tried to work closely with Steve Gomes, with Rosemary Parga Duran, with other educators, Dr. Walsh, so the number of people in the education community, to make sure that what we're doing is complementing, not contrasting what they're doing, because you can be at cross purposes. I mean, you can be, with the best intentions, you can be charging down one area and you're working against the grain with what other government entities are doing.
Yeah, and I think what you hear with a lot of people when they join gangs young is they're looking for a place to belong.
Sure.
And if we as a community can offer students a place to go and belong, the Boys and Girls Club or an after-school art program or athletics is another great thing.
Point to me about art.
It's going to limit the people that choose that lifestyle.
That's absolutely right, and you're absolutely right that it is about wanting a sense of community or family family or belonging. We all remember back when we were teenagers, you segue from your parents being the most important persons in your life to your friends. And, you know, it was way more important what our friends thought of us. Our parents were often obstacles to be circumvented in some way or another, you know.
That's why
we wanted to go out.
That's why grandparents and grandchildren get along, because they have the same adversary.
That's very true. That's a very accurate statement. So I'm optimistic. The wonderful thing about this and the situation that we find ourselves in with gangs is it's unlike some situations that are insoluble. This is fixable. This is truly fixable. We do not have to accept a worsening, gang climate in Merced County. We can redirect our resources, our priorities, and we can turn this around. I mean,
and on the other end of the spectrum, after they've chosen those lifestyles, we need to be able to assure the communities that they've infiltrated that we're on the same side. That when something does happen in your community, you can come to us, you can come to law enforcement, and you will get help and not be abandoned. And I think that's where the redirection of resources comes in, where you're putting officers in there on a consistent basis and developing those lines of communication and that trust factor, so they feel comfortable coming forward. Because at this point, that's not the case in the county.
No, it isn't. And we've interesting in the Southeast Asian community, some of the most difficult cases to solve are cases in which Southeast Asians are involved in some way or another. Because, and I had a really interesting conversation with newly appointed Judge Paul Lowe and asked him about that, because they will not talk to you by and large. I've gone over to the Lau Family Center when there have been crimes over the years and talked with the elders, and they love this country and they have contributed in so many ways to the progress of this. And when you look at every year in the schools, the valedictorians and other, they're Southeast Asian kids, they're second generation, an amazing story. But when there are crimes, a lot of times they are just clammed up. And I asked Paul about that, and he said, well, one, it's a trust matter. They don't have that relationship. Two, it's a shame thing that they do not, it reflects on the whole community, and they will handle it themselves or deal with this internally in some way. But it's very interesting how you have, different reactions from different communities to the crime problems that take place within their communities.
Yeah, those are obstacles that I don't think a lot of people think about. Case, we're out of time, buddy. You want to take us home?
Yeah, I just want to, again, one of my favorite shows is Law and Order, and the first half of the show, they deal with the arrest and the police side of things, the investigation. The second half is the prosecution or Larry's side of things. We're definitely out of balance, folks, in Merced County. Some people wouldn't say crap if they had a mouthful. Larry Morse is not one of those people. He tells it like it is. He's thought about this for a lot of years. He's had these thoughts. They're nothing new. It's good to see it finally out in the community, and hopefully we can get some resolution, because when we hear surveys done at the last council meeting where the UC Merced students are quote-unquote scared of downtown because it's a scary place, that says volumes as to where we're at. So, again, I want to thank Larry for coming in, for taking the time to talk to us here on Citizen Watch. Again, we have Robert the Velvet Sledgehammer Tomasetti, Steve Colvard, and Robert, what do we say every time we leave?
Goodbye. Arrivederci.
And one other thing I'd like to add, Case, before we hang up, what I'm taking out of this from Mr. Morse is hope, optimism.
Yeah,
that we can do this. We can do this. Is not a lost cause.
No, it's not.
We will do this. I pledge.
Problem. We need community involvement. We need law enforcement involvement, and we need the Board of Supervisors, because you guys have the purse strings.
They're the leaders.
I promise you we will turn this around. I promise.
Good night, Mrs. Calabash, wherever you are.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The screen door slams.